Hello and welcome to a quick update for the Scavengers. Today I've got a series of questions which, thank you very much to Omar. I'm grateful to you for sending in some questions because otherwise this area would get rather tedious. Cheers, cup of tea. So there's a number of questions here. The first is, how much of your life outside reading and writing has influenced your books? So in other words, have my own life experiences and the people I've met and situations I've faced, how have they fed into my characters and plot lines? Also, do I have any advice on how to approach everyday situations with the mind of a writer? Do you have to be a keen observer, and how do you sharpen that skill? Well, I was very lucky because before I started writing I spent 13 years as a computer salesman, and I was very fortunate because as a salesman I was trying to have 5 or 6 meetings a day with new people, and so I had an incredible spread of different characters that I could call on when I started imagining writing books. Do my own life experiences and people I've met feed into the characters? Absolutely. Every single book is full of things that have happened to me or things that have happened to my family. So for example, when I consider the Templar series, that started off really as a fairly straightforward series of pure crime books. But fairly early on I realised that I had to make the characters more accessible to the reader. And one way of doing that was, for example, developing children. So as I had children in my family, so I gave children to Baldwin and Simon, and it was very much fed on not only my children but also my nephews and nieces and how they reacted to certain things. Those came straight back into the book. So yes, I do know one lady who is now considerably older, but when she was a teenager she caused a certain amount of mayhem for her family. These things happen, and that fed directly into Simon's daughter when she started going off the rails a bit when he was given the post of Keeper of the Port of Dartmouth, Keeper of the Customs. So every single person in my books is based on a number of other people, and that is the case for Baldwin, for example. He's based very largely on aspects of my personality, but his methodical thinking and a lot of his characterization also came from 2 different people I used to work with who were very delightful people, honourable. It's quite sad that only a couple of them, that all the people I worked with, were honourable and decent, but they were lovely characters, and those 2 fed straight into Baldwin. My wife fed into a lot of the women in the books, the 2 wives in particular, but I think what happens with an author is you tend to see a situation or see a person and you imagine elaborating on that person. So for example, if you're in an argument with somebody, then that may give you a lot of impetus for a scene in a book, because for example you get into a little bit of a barney with somebody, you get several comments flung at you, you respond as best you can, but then you might spend the next 3 days imagining slightly better, faster responses you would have given. So one thing about writing books is that it gives you instant one-upmanship, because you can always finish the argument your way and the other person won't necessarily. That's useful. It's something that everybody does, I think. It's not just a writer's thing, but so often when you feel that you haven't got the best of an argument, somebody else has got one over you, then you're going to be much more keen to try to finish the argument a different way in your own mind. Which is one reason why authors make particularly bad witnesses, I think, because all too often the line between what has happened and what you think should have happened gets very blurred. And as a factual reporter of things that have happened, I am one of the least reliable. I know that. Little things, for example, once I had a car that was parked outside my flat when I was young. Somebody else drove into the back of it, and I got to the window in time to see the two perpetrators running off. Now, I saw them and they were very clearly Hispanic. They were quite clearly, I thought, well dressed and looked as though they were very likely to be drug dealers. Luckily, a friend who had no particular relationship to the car was also there, and when I reported the incident to the police, he pointed out that one was fair-haired, one was ginger-haired. There's no way either of them was Hispanic. Both of them were dressed very tattily. They didn't look as though they had any money. So my view of those two characters was entirely wrong. Why was it so wrong? I think the simple answer to that is the night before I'd watched Miami Vice on TV, and my mindset was any criminal must be a drug dealer, must be Hispanic, and that was the sum total of the evidence I could give. Luckily my friend Fred was there and he could give a far more accurate description. But that fact of being an unreliable witness has turned up in several of my books because I think it's a very important fact that people don't appreciate. They don't appreciate when they hear someone standing up in court, for example, giving evidence, that the evidence they may be given may be absolutely 100% believed by the person giving that evidence, and it could be 100% diametrically opposed to the truth. This is an issue that people have. Do you have to be a keen observer? No, I don't think so. But what you do have to do is carry pens and paper with you at all times. Get into the habit of carrying a notebook. Doesn't matter how big, doesn't matter what sort. It's just something that you can stick notes into. And then if you're sitting in a cafe and you hear a piece of dialogue that's particularly amusing, write it down. If you're, as happened to me a little while ago, crossing a bridge and you hear someone talking on a phone, really interesting one-sided conversation, and that gave me an idea for a short story. Write it down, because there's one thing you can absolutely guarantee, and that is that if you don't write it down, you will forget it, and you'll forget it quickly. I love going out and about because most of my life is spent right here in this office, and as an author I need to get out a lot more and get to hear people talking. Currently it's quite rare I get an opportunity to, but it is an absolutely essential part of the writer's job to look at people, analyse them, and look at the world through their eyes. So as a salesman, a large part of my job was trying to translate what my company had to offer into something that would appeal to that person I was talking to. Now the person I was talking to could be a data processing manager, a computer information systems officer, it could be a secretary, it could be anyone at all. And the objective for me was to see what it was that turned that person on and what they wanted to achieve. Did they want to look really good in their company because they'd bought something that was fantastic and would really help the company? Did they want something that was just there to make their life a lot easier? Did they want something that would speed up information flow and thereby make things better for someone else? Look at what the actual requirements were for that person, and then you can tailor what you've got to match what they need. And that was a wonderful, wonderful series of lessons that I learned all through my computing career. As an author, what you have to do is a similar job. You're inventing characters up here all the time, and then putting thoughts into their mind. So what you have to do is put yourself literally in their shoes and look at the world through their eyes. Now this is why writing is so exhausting mentally, because in a day I might be considering a scene from 7 different perspectives. I might have my investigator, I might have a subsidiary investigator, I might be looking at it from the point of view of the murderer, from the point of view of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 suspects. It could be any number of people. And when you're inventing a world and inventing characters and then looking at the world from each of those points of view, having to remember what's motivating that person at that time, their background, everything else about them, that is really exhausting work. So, does my life affect the way I write? Yes, 100%. Incidents that the dogs create, incidents that the children create, things I've seen, things I've witnessed, things I've experienced, all of them get thrown into the melting pot. Do you have to be a keen observer, and how do you sharpen that skill? I don't think a keen observer necessarily. You have to be observant. If you're sitting on a train and you see someone, imagine what job they've got, imagine what sort of home life they've got, and then look at the rest of the train through their eyes if you can. I have a habit which has got me glared at several times, but I will try to observe people on a train. I will make notes about what they're wearing, because I don't see people in ordinary clothes every day of the week. I'm normally sitting in here, and living in a small village in Devon, you don't see what people are wearing to work. I'll make a note of sort of briefcase they've got, the sort of computer they've got, any conversations they're having. If I hear it, I'll make a note of that. And then I'll start trying to imagine what they're doing, and I'll try to imagine extreme things. And that's just getting the brain up here ticking over. It's getting into the creative attitude and spirit helps you no end when you're trying to write a book later. I think that's one aspect of sharpening it. Look through the world through somebody else's eyes. And what often happens, strangely enough, just as a final thought, is that I don't intend bringing scenes in necessarily. But when I start writing a book, a lot of people will write, they'll have an absolutely well-defined structure, they'll know exactly how the book's going to go, this is the synopsis, the book will not deviate one iota. I don't, I've tried that, it doesn't work for me. I find that all too often, when you do that, you end up with a story that is based on a plot, and you make the characters change to comply with your plot. Stephen King doesn't do that, J.R.R. Tolkien didn't do that. Very few authors do that. You're far better off spending that time and effort inventing really good characters based on real people, and then making the plot comply with their attitudes. If you have someone and they're going through life nice and straightforward, and you put a blockage on the tracks of their life so that they're forced to hurtle off the tracks, that is much more interesting than having a blockage and this is what you want the outcome to be. If you leave the outcome absolutely open, but you have a really well-defined character, you're going to know how they'll respond after they've been affected by this big incident, this event, whatever it might be. Doesn't matter whether it's psychological, whether it's physical, doesn't matter what it is. If you know what the characters are, then that will help. Now, if you're new to writing, the first thing to do is base characters on people that you really know quite well. Yes, you can go out and invent lots of characters. I find it a lot easier to take aspects of brothers or friends or other members of the family and use them. Don't ever admit to them that you have, because if you put in some sort of naughty or incompetent or other aspects, then they might sue. But if you can pick someone who you know really well and then write from their point of view, that takes away a lot of the effort in actually creating. So, how much of my life outside of reading and writing has influenced my books? A huge amount. Do I think my own life experiences and the people I've met and situations I've faced feed into my characters and plot lines? Absolutely, 100%. And do I have any advice on how to approach everyday situations with the mind of a writer? Do you have to be a keen observer? How do you sharpen that skill? I think I've given you some clues there. Difficult to know how much further to go on with that. If that's raised any questions, do please let me know. I'll be more than happy to talk about it a bit further. But for now, that's a few minutes, and I have to get back to my edit. Oh, what joy. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope that helps, and do please send me a note if there's any more you'd like to ask about. Cheers, take care.